It's The Lit Show with Jeremy Fee. New episode each Tuesday. Authors welcome, comments encouraged. Hello everyone, welcome to The Lit Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Fee. As always, I've got something special for you today. It's the reading wrap-up book battle for Horror Mayhem. And also, at the end of the video, a potential TBR for June on the Range. It's 2022. What a month it has been here in May as I have finished out another school year. There's just been so much going on, and my apologies for missing the last 2 weeks of video posting. I'm happy to give you an exciting book battle. I read way too much this month. Maybe this summer I will calm down with my reading, but I doubt it because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and summer vacation is a great time for audiobooks. With no further ado, here are all those books that I read in May in case you want to look at the list and decide what you want to root for, because I'm about to get right into the battles. We can go through them one pair at a time to see what's going to advance out of the prelims and then advance beyond and on to see what will win this month. It's so exciting. First up, we've got a book I borrowed from a friend and colleague who recommended it. It's called The Chain by Adrian McKenty. This is a suspense thriller book that actually came across as psychological horror to me as well. In The Chain, the idea is that a mother has to deal with a situation in which her daughter has been kidnapped. And to get her daughter back, not only does she have to pay the ransom, but she has to kidnap another kid. And that's how the chain works, each person along the way to keep the chain alive. Such a gruesome concept, asking just how far would you go to get back a loved one, family member. Thought it was an absolutely amazing book. I thought it was wonderful. Similarly to my thoughts last month with the first book I read this book and thought, my goodness, will this be the best book of the month? Is this one just gonna win from the very beginning? Now we know last month that did not end up happening. The first book of the month, which was awesome, did not actually win the book battle. So we'll have to see how this book does, but it is paired up right now against the Doctor Who Tales of Terror anthology, which I was so excited to read, especially as a part of Horror Mayhem. For the 4 weeks of Horror Mayhem, there were different themes, and the first one was supernatural beings or creatures, and I knew that the Doctor Who anthology would have plenty of creatures because of things like the Daleks and the weird aliens that the Doctors dealt with over time. Unfortunately, what I did not know about this book is that it's actually a children's book. Turned out I was not the ideal target audience for the book, as much as I am a Whovian, huge fan of Doctor Who. The Chain by Adrian McKenty easily gets the win. Sorry, Doctor Who Tales of Terror. I do not recommend this book for adults. It is something that I think clearly children would enjoy, but it is just way too simple for an adult reader. Our next pairing in the first bracket is a book that was my BookTube Spin number 6 winner under the number 17. It was Bring Me Flesh, I'll Bring Hell by Martin Rose. This was actually a short audiobook that I listened to. I'm not sure exactly how long it would be as a book on its own, but not very long. It is this weird concept of a private eye who is undead, a zombie-like undead detective. I wasn't entirely feeling it, but if you're into that, I think that you would enjoy the book. It is up against a short story that was posted on the internet by BookTube's own Say Kevi. It is called Chicago Beauty. It is the first story in the Wilhelmina murders. I absolutely love Chicago Beauty. It's easily going to get the win out of this pairing. I love murder mysteries in general, and Say Kevi did a great job with writing this one. Up next in the second bracket, first pairing, another short story that won for my BookTube Spin number 6. This one was really short. It's called The End of the Road by Craig DeLuise, and it was alright, but when you compare it to the next book in the pairing, it's not going to win, unfortunately, because I read BookTube, HorrorTube's own Regina St. Clair's book, Unmasked. It was being given away for free on Amazon. I don't know if you can still get it for free, but Regina St. Clair was doing a promotion. Since I watched the YouTube channel, I heard about it, went and downloaded the book onto my e-reader and read it. It was a great murder mystery. A family in an isolated location. One by one, people start disappearing. It's got a lot of great family drama in there also. It had some shades, some atmosphere, so to speak, that reminded me of Sunset Boulevard, which I really liked a lot. Regina St. Clair's Unmasked is advancing. Then we've got some serious books, some really tough to read. Up next is Zombie by Joyce Carol Oates. I did not know what I was getting into with this one, but week 2 for Horror Mayhem was Gothic, and Regina St. Clair's book really covered that with the Unmasked book because it took place at a Gothic mansion. So I used that as my Gothic entry, and I thought, all right, I can go back to another monster book, but I didn't realize Joyce Carol Oates was not writing a book about a zombie. That's just the title. This is a horrifying book. Just awful. The horrible, villainous main character. It's not going to win. I'm just going to say that. And I would not recommend this book for people who've been through any sort of trauma, abuse, that sort of thing, because Joyce Carol Oates went dark. Very, very dark. It's up against Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which many people consider to be Agatha Christie's greatest detective novel. Funny thing, it's gonna win this pairing, but funny thing going in, my brain got confused. I read 45 pages of this book and was like, wow, these characters are on this isolated island. Only the people who've been introduced should be there. Where's Miss Marple? How is she gonna get on this island? How will she know these people and figure this out? And finally, it was on page 45 that I was like, oh yeah, this is not a Miss Marple novel. So I fear part of my opinion of the book is colored by the fact that I mistakenly was thinking that this was a Miss Marple novel, and it's not. There is no appearance of Miss Marple. By the time you get to page 45, yeah, you've really gotten to know who these characters are and the fact that they're isolated on an island. Don't expect a Miss Marple to show up. Moving on to bracket 3, the next book that I read was The Hunger of Old Stars, which is a cosmic horror anthology, which was perfect for week 3 for Horror Mayhem for reading cosmic horror. This is an anthology put out by Splattering Publishing. I recommend it if you enjoy reading cosmic horror. After I read it, I started reading the newest books I have from B.K. Greenwood. If you've been watching the channel, you know I've read the first 2 books in the Last Roman series, and B.K. Greenwood, the author, was kind enough to send me signed copies of book 3 of the series and a collection of short stories from the series. So up next is the collection of short stories. It is called Bastion. They were good. They were interesting. When I pit them up against The Hunger of Old Stars, which is also a short story collection, I have to say it's a tough match. I'm going to give the win to Bastion, and I hope I'm not biased for getting a free autographed copy of the book. Hopefully that bias doesn't come into play. I enjoyed both books. I recommend them both. Next up is book 3 in the Last Roman series, Absolution. It's hard to talk about book 3 in a series without giving away spoilers, so I will repeat some of what I've said probably about books 1 and 2. It's an exciting, action-packed, fast-paced series that involves immortal characters. We've got some frenemies where they've both become immortal, they've lived for centuries, ended up on different sides of things. There is a mix of religion and mystery in the story, the same sort of way that you would have religion mixed in Dan Brown novels and that sort of thing, but it's more action-packed. It's like Gladiator or Highlander with these awesome cinematic set pieces that happen. So I recommend it as an action series with some historical fiction mixed in and the flashbacks with the immortals like you would see with the Highlander story. It is up against Scene and Structure, which is a book to help you with your writing. Really not a fair competition there, because I'm going to pick the fun, action-oriented story over the book about writing. Though I will mention, Scene and Structure disappointed me in the sense that there are some author tubers who have really hyped this book. I've heard about it from a couple different channels saying how awesome Scene and Structure was, and I just didn't feel like it lived up to the hype. I forgot to go in with low expectations. I believed the hype, so maybe that's my bad. I usually try to go into things with low expectations. And then bracket 4, I got to my Anne Rice audiobooks. The Witching Hour is the first one here, followed by Lasher. These are Anne Rice's witch novels, and eventually they tie into the Vampire Chronicles, though really you could argue they tie in from the beginning, because the Talamasca, which is the group of watchers essentially who keep an eye on supernatural stuff, they're in the vampire novels and they're in this witch trilogy, the Mayfair Witches, but ultimately these will tie in a more serious way. I have heard. I have not yet gotten to the book. After this trilogy is when they are supposed to tie in. So I got the first 2 books in the series here, The Witching Hour and Lasher Against Each Other. I'm going to pick the first book in the series. It was Meteor. It introduced it, so I'm giving it the win. Then we've got the third book in the series, Taltos, and it is up against The Dark Descent, which if you watch Michael K. Vaughn's YouTube channel, you may have heard from him, is supposedly the best collection of horror fiction ever. Of all time. At least he said that in a video a long time ago. I don't know if that's still his opinion, but I really enjoyed The Dark Descent. I've been reading it little by little over time, and my goodness. There are also a lot of stories in there that I already knew. There are a lot of stories in there that I'd already read. And I didn't go ahead and reread all of them. Though, with the Call of Cthulhu, I did reread the beginning because the beginning lines of the Call of Cthulhu are really impactful. I believe that there's a whole lot there. I like the way they're stated. I'm going to go ahead and give the winning for this pairing to The Dark Descent. It'll be advancing, but let's go back up to the top of our brackets. For our next round, let's have The Chain up against Chicago Beauty. As much as I love the work of Say Kevi, I'm gonna give this win to The Chain because it's a full novel. Chicago Beauty is a short story published on its own. So even though it's enjoyable, it doesn't have the same sort of huge feeling impact that The Chain does. I was really impressed with Adrian McKenty's work with The Chain and how much that I felt the suspense and wanted to keep reading throughout the story to find out what happened. Even though some parts were a little predictable, sometimes I really had no idea what was coming because you ask yourself, how far is this mother going to go? How far will these characters go to get their family members back? What are they willing to do? So The Chain is advancing. It's going to make it into semifinals. Then from the next bracket, we've got Regina St. Clair, our St. Clair's book, Unmasked, up against Agatha Christie with And Then There Were None. Wow. Regina St. Clair is amazing, and I did really enjoy Unmasked, but I'm gonna have to give this one to the master, Agatha Christie. It's different, too. It does not have the same sort of formula and style as a lot of other murder mysteries, so it does stand out. And Then There Were None is advancing to semifinals. For the third bracket, we've got Bastion, the short story collection from the Last Roman series, up against book 3 of the Last Roman series, both by B.K. Greenwood. I'm going to give the win to book 3, Absolution. Because it is a full book, it does bring the trilogy to a close. I think if you read the entire trilogy, that you're going to enjoy the third book and how it all comes together. Last Roman Book 3, advancing to semifinals. And then down in our fourth bracket, The Witching Hour by Anne Rice, Book 1 of the Mayfair Witches trilogy, up against The Dark Descent, which may very well be the greatest collection of horror stories ever put together as an anthology. It's Anne Rice up against a whole army of authors. I mean, it's a huge book with a lot of stories. The Dark Descent is getting the win here. Sorry, Anne Rice. That means we've got our final 4. We've got the semifinals group. The Chain by Adrian McKenty. And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. The Last Roman Book 3, Absolution by B.K. Greenwood. And The Dark Descent, edited by David G. Hartwell. Let's go to the top for semifinals. In the first half of the bracket, The Chain Adrian McKenty against And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. With The Chain, we've got this concept novel that is very suspenseful. Like I said, it's sold as a thriller, but I believe it should be classified as psychological horror as well because of what the characters go through, up against what a lot of people believe is Agatha Christie's greatest detective novel. I'm going to disagree there, though. I enjoyed Murder on the Orient Express more than this book. I also enjoyed Death on the Nile more than this book. Hercule Poirot, just such a fun character. Also, I love Miss Marple's antics when I read a Miss Marple novel, and neither of those characters were in And Then There Were None. So perhaps my bias for liking those kind of characters, and the fact that I really was not a fan of the ending of And Then There Were None. Maybe if I read it a second or third time, I would appreciate the ending more. I don't know. I'm giving the win here to The Chain by Adrian McKenty. I thought it was overall a better paced book and that it had a better ending. Alright, the second half of semifinals. The Last Roman Book 3, Absolution by B.K. Greenwood against The Dark Descent, edited by David G. Hartwell, which includes so many amazing, powerful stories, which I was able to use for Horror Mayhem. Just reading The Dark Descent alone as one book would have sufficed for Horror Mayhem because it had everything in there. It had the supernatural beings, creatures, it had gothic literature, it had cosmic horror, and it had folklore work, though really I was using the Anne Rice witch books as my folklore entry. Out of these two, as much as I enjoyed the B.K. Greenwood books, I have to give the win here to The Dark Descent, which means our finals round is The Chain by Adrian McKenty up against The Dark Descent. I know last month I teased that I could just do a tie. I do still have wildcard spots available, but I'm not going to do a tie. I'm going to highly recommend that you read The Chain by Adrian McKenty, and I'm going to give the win to The Dark Descent, because at some point, if you are at all a fan of horror, you should read The Dark Descent. I mean, just look through the table of contents for that book. So The Dark Descent, even though I technically have read some of those stories throughout my life and was reading it over a series of months, really just ending the book this month, it's gonna get the win for best read of the month because this is when I finished it. The Dark Descent is my best read of May 2022. Let's go ahead and put it on with our end of the year book battle chart as we are filling that in with different books. So exciting to think about end of the year book battle and that eventually leading to hopefully an end of the decade book battle if I am still on BookTube posting videos at the end of the decade. Now we're getting to the part of the video where I need to talk about what I might be reading in June. Saying might be, it's a potential TBR. Look, it's my summer vacation. I don't want to have a commitment for what I will definitely read. But I do want to participate in June on the Range, which is created by Michael K. Vaughn. He's encouraging people to read westerns, cowboy stories in the month of June, and I think that's great. I have several Maverick books sitting around that I have not gotten to, which is funny when you consider when I first started my channel, I took pictures of my Maverick books, and I was planning on going right at them. I thought within the first month or two that I would do some huge videos talking about Maverick, the literary connections with the old TV show and movie and all of that, and I never got around to it for all this time. So hopefully that will happen in June. Hopefully I will get the books read and make some sort of video this summer, June or July, talking about literary Maverick, the books that connect to the TV series and film. Hope that you will enjoy that. This month I failed to get to the books by Dane Cobain that I want to read. He's got some books out that I've heard really great things about that I haven't read. Scarlet Sins is a short story collection. Former Lee and Meat, which I assume are some sort of horror, thriller type of novels. Also, I've got R. St. Clair's book Women in Trouble, and since I enjoyed Unmasked so much, it would be great if I could get to that. I want to continue the Anne Rice series. Merrick is up next. That's the one that is said to combine the witches and vampire storylines together. And who knows, maybe I could get some more Anne Rice books. Blood and Gold, Blackwood Farm, Blood Canticle. And there are so many more books I want to read. I could read some of those Ken Follett books I've got sitting on my shelf that I've been wanting to get to. Of course, I could also read some really short books because I still have not read the Murderbot Diaries, and I would love to read those for science fiction. Of course, I could just go on and on about books I need to read. I don't want to keep you here all day. I'll go ahead and end the video. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that you come here, that you like the video, that you post comments down below. So please tell me, what book were you rooting for? What did you think was going to win? What decision might you have made differently? What thoughts do you have about these books? What have you been reading? What do you plan to read this summer? And on and on. Thank you so much. Every Tuesday is a good Tuesday for a book talk. Peace.